Hi, welcome to Math for All. Today we're going to be talking about parabolas, which relate to quadratic equations. Anytime you see a shape that looks like an arc, it relates to a parabola. Now, when we talked about linear equations, we've noticed that a straight line crosses an x-axis and a y-axis once. Parabola will cross the x-axis, so that relates to the x-intercepts. But sometimes it may cross the x-axis more than once, or sometimes none of the times, as we will see in some of our occasions. But it will have a single y-intercept also. So this would be the y-intercept. Some terms you should be familiar with are the following. You need to know that the place where the parabola changes its direction is known as the vertex. And a line that represents a mirror-like image for both sides of the parabola is known as the axis of symmetry. When we've talked about linear equations, we mentioned that the linear equation in a slope-intercept form is written as y equals mx plus b, where m represented the slope and b was the y-intercept. Now, a very basic equation of a parabola, we will talk about more complicated equations later on. For a parabola, it's y equals x squared. Now, what happens to a number when we square it? If we had to create a table of values, so for example, if I have my x values on the left side and my y values on the right side, let's see what happens to our y values when we explore only positive numbers for now. So when x is 0, 0 squared is 0. When x is 1, if you square 1, what does squaring mean? 1, a number times itself. So 1 times 1 gives you 1. If x is 2, 2 squared would be 2 times 2, so you're going to get 4. And the question is, what happens when we have negative numbers? When x is negative 1 times negative 1, anytime you multiply a negative number by a negative number, we get a positive answer. And so our answer is 1. Negative 2 times negative 2 gives us 4. And so we can see that a parabola will have 0 as its vertex, and it's also along the line that's called the axis of symmetry. And when it changes its course, you can see that it doesn't drop below the line, but reflects in a very similar manner according to what you had on the positive side. And so this right here, this point, is known as the minimal. It's the lowest value of a parabola. So this would be known as a minimum value. If you had a parabola that was shifted, and let's say if I drew a parabola over on this side, you can see that this parabola had a single x-intercept, whereas this one has none. And previously, the parabola that I drew that went across this way had 2 x-intercepts. Next, a parabola can sometimes flip. And so, since this was the lowest value, it represented the minimum. This right here, if a parabola is flipped, this is known as a maximum. That's it. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. What happens when we have the generic equation of a parabola, and we have y equals x squared versus y equals 2x squared. In this case, we have a number in front of x squared. If you recall, when we talk about the equation of a line, whenever you had a number in front of x, it represented the slope. When we talk about a parabola, the number in front of x squared represents a stretch factor. Parabola will actually stretch. This is actually known as a vertical or a horizontal stretch. Okay, let's take a look. We already had this table of values for y equals x squared, and the parabola looked like this. We're going to graph it. So we can start at 0, do the positive numbers, and then we can do our negative numbers. When x is 0, y is 0. When x is 1, y is 1. When x is 2, y is 4. So we've plotted those points. We do the same thing on the opposite side. When x is negative 1, y is 1. When x is negative 2, y is 4. Okay, let's connect those dots. Okay, and we get something like this. Now, if you introduce a number in front of x squared, here's how it affects the entire equation. Let's do our positive numbers first. When x is 0, 0 squared is 0 times 2, you still have 0. When x is 1, 1 times 1 is 1 times 2, you get 2. When x is 2, 2 squared is 4, 4 times 2, you get 8. Similarly, with the negative numbers, we know that if it's a parabola, whenever you square a number, you'll just get the same answers, but on the opposite side. And so negative 1 squared is 1, 1 times 2 is 2. So we can automatically assume that this number will be 8. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8. Let's plot those points. 0, 0. When x is 1, y is 2. When x is 2, y is 8. On the opposite side, when x is negative 1, y is 2. When x is negative 2, y is 8. Okay, and let us connect our points. Okay, so we can see that whatever our values were initially, with this type of a parabola, y equals 2x squared, you can see that the parabola has actually stretched vertically because the gap between this point and this point has doubled. The gap between this point and this point has also doubled. And so it stretches vertically by this factor. Okay, that's it.